Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel here. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about a bit of an update I did on my Blue Eyes Buster Dragon deck that I've been kind of test playing both online and in person with a couple of friends. And a couple of things I learned about the deck as I'm playing through it and just learning different lines. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to show you some of the changes I made to the deck and then talk about it. Also, I know that this today's Sunday for me at least, and the I think Australia Sydney YCS just wrapped up, and a couple Blue Eyes deck made it to the top 32. I know two of them were Primite versions, and then one of them was a Primite Buster Blader version, which I thought was kind of cool that that made it up there to the top. I think it's top 16. So yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about the version of my deck, and I was test playing this yesterday, and I kind of made changes, and I saw the list that came out for YCS, and it looked pretty close to what I have. But I mean, then again, it's um, sort of a standardized list more or less. So let's just talk about it, all right? So the YCS top 16 was only playing two Buster Bladers, or sorry, playing just one Buster Blader. But for me, I still like the two here. I'll show you why I like the two. Like I was in one of the combo lines, I actually searched this one, added it to my hand, and continued to play the deck pretty well. It helped actually unbrick myself. If I didn't have two of them, I would just be totally bricked. But because I had two of the Buster Blader versions in my deck, I was able to unbrick myself, and I'll show you kind of that line of play later. But yeah, so two Buster Bladers. I'm gonna go through it quickly. Two Blue Eyes here. And then you got the one Jet Dragon. Jet Dragon actually came in clutch in terms of the grind game. I was able to summon this with spears, and then I also was able to dump this with Kaiser. So I'm also going to talk about that. I'm playing one Kaiser Seahorse. So yeah, it actually came up quite a bit, and it made my opponent, well, at least my friend, pretty frustrated on how to properly deal with this. The only way to really deal with this is either banish the Blue Eyes in the grave or banish the Jet Dragon itself. So the fact that it kept reoccurring, pretty good. Granted, it can be a bricky card, if you don't have your graveyard set up or you draw it. But even if you draw it, it's not the worst card, right? If you go into battle phase and attack or someone attacks you, you can always summon this, assuming that you have at least the Blue Eyes in your graveyard. But it was pretty decent. Then we have, for the rest of the Blue Eyes engine here, you do have the triple Sage, the um, the Wyvern Buster, or Buster Wyvern, I guess, or Buster Whelp, and then the one Dragon Buster here. So I'm not gonna really talk about that too much. And then for the other card I want to talk about here was the Kaiser Seahorse. So Kaiser Seahorse, it's actually a pretty interesting card. It's not like a bad card by any means. Typically, people play either Kaiser Seahorse or Master with Eyes of Blue as their other sort of like starter, I guess, or one-ofs. I prefer Seahorse over Master of Blue because it does a couple of things here. It can summon it itself. If you have a Blue Eyes White Dragon on the board, it can extend itself from the hand. And then also, if you think your opponent's going to imperm your spirit, then this card can help you put a Blue Eyes in the graveyard. So it acts kind of as like a foolish burial. So you can go Kaiser Seahorse, send it to the graveyard, and then summon the Spirit of Blue. Do your chain links or whatever. And if you think your opponent is going to imperm or Veiler this, then you still have the Seahorse to sort of fall back on to dump the Blue Eyes. Because if if they Veiler or imperm this, you're not going to have access to Mausoleum. Therefore, you can't dump Blue Eyes to the graveyard, and it's kind of like a choke point. So this kind of helps unchoke yourself in some sense. So it's kind of nice there. So just the one copy. And the other thing that's nice about it is kind of like with Master of Blues, is that you can target your Maiden, and I believe per the ruling, obviously can't go any lower than level 1. So if you wanted to, you can just target her, try to decrease her level, and she will trigger to a special summon of Blue Eyes from the grave or another tuner from the grave. So it kind of does a bit of a comboing purpose there. And I believe the list in Sydney also played one copy. So yeah, I think it's one copy isn't bad. Like it's not the worst. It's an extender. It's an unbreaker. You can use this if you already have Blue Eyes in the grave. You can use this to dump Jet Dragon. Yeah, and just it's overall a not a bad extender, I guess. So or starter, I should say. It serves as both a starter and a extender, so it's kind of nice in that sense. Okay, rest of the deck here, just for the hand traps, triple Veiler, triple Blossom there. I'm not really talk too much about that. And then here I decided to cut Nibiru to 1, or sorry, not to 1, to 2, just because Nibiru, people are expecting to play around it nowadays. It kind of is dead in your hand sometimes. Sometimes I want to draw a second copy. Seeing one copy in your hand is good enough. And like the deck that it punishes the most would probably be like Malice, and maybe if Blue Eyes, if they're trying to extend into the Crimson Dragon combo. But even though if you try to extend into that, most Blue Eyes can still make a board even after they get Nibiru'd. At least from my experience, at least my version of the deck, I still made a board after getting Nibiru'd. Um, which I can talk about why the Buster cards are kind of good. Because the Buster cards are, in some essence, anti-Nibiru. Because even if you get your board Nibiru, you can still make a board on your opponent's turn with the fusions, and so you're not completely shit out of luck if you get Nibiru. So I don't mind just playing as greedily as I can, and if I get punished, it's whatever's. Unless I specifically I triple tactics talents my opponent or something, I see that they have Nibiru, obviously then I will not extend. But um, for my use here, Nibiru is good. When you also don't have a board setup. If you have a board setup, I prefer not sacrificing my board. If I had the Buster lockup, um, then the Nibiru is kind of dead in my hand if I went first. So I decided to cut Nibiru just the 2, maybe even cut it completely from the deck. I'm not too sure. But for now, I'm playing just 2 copies. Then I decided to go ahead and take out the 3rd copy of Nibiru and add in the Bistrio. And this card is pretty good. You can search it off with the spear mode, or not spear mode, seal. Sorry, I should be saying seal, not the spear. I kept saying spear, but you can search it off with spear, and then you can get the effect search another dragon. So you basically have 2 targets in this deck for seal here. You can either summon this or the jet dragon, and obviously it's still technically a hand trap, so not bad as a 1 copy. For the Druid Swarm, I decided to put that into my extra deck, or sorry, my side deck. Still keep it in there because I don't think I'll necessarily need it every game. So yeah, for the spells here, we have still the same ratios. Um, if you're playing Pot of Prosperity or some other searcher, or you're playing Triple Tactics Talent, you can probably cut the Bingo Machine. I still like the Bingo Machine just because it's still kind of one of those cards that will get you into this copy of Wishes. So like I mentioned before, like a 3.5 copy of Wishes, right? And this deck really needs Wishes. Unlike the other versions of the Blue Eyes deck, I think the Bluster Blader one really needs it because you really need to get rid of cards in your hand, like your Memories and your Buster or Dragon Whelp. If you have those in your hands, they're dead. So you sort of want to get rid of them. So this particular version of the Blue Eyes deck really wants to see this card in its opening hand, especially if you draw into Buster Blader, you draw into Blue Eyes, you draw into any of their traps. You want to convert those cards, or at least you want to put them in the graveyard. Even if you get Ash Blossom, that's perfectly okay, because then you have those cards in the graveyard. You can kind of work off of your graveyard there, but you really, really want to put those Buster cards into the graveyard. And then finally, we have just the 1 of each here. Triple Texas is pretty good, and same with Call by the Graves. Now, most people will side the Call by the Graves because it's not that great going second per se, but I still find it pretty good in the sense that when you go second, your opponent's still going to have, they're still going to have hand traps, right? And they can still have maybe Veiler, they'll still have maybe Droll, or maybe they'll have Ash, right? And so it's not like suddenly if you went second, you're not gonna be playing against those cards. Maybe in round maybe if you win game 1 and then you go game 2, then maybe you can, and you expect to go second, then maybe you can take out Call by the Graves. But in the regular game 1, people are still loaded up on their hand traps, so it's still never a dead card per se. Obviously, it takes a spot of a hand trap, but I still think it's worth playing. I took out Thrust because I ended up just not liking Thrust all that much, to be honest. Um, I mean, there's only one really good card to search, and that's the prologue. But other than that, there wasn't many good targets to search with Thrust, so I ended up just cutting it completely, not really needing it. But Tactics is pretty good. Tactics is kind of like your other anti going, or unbricking yourself, right? If you go first, you get hand trapped. Your bushes get ashes or something like that. And you just need something to unbrick yourself. You can just draw 2 cards, or if they Veiler or something, or they do whatever, and you still have a bunch of cards to extend into, you can still full combo. You may want to take a look at their hand, and then see if they have a nib, see if they have more hand traps. Then that way you can kind of play around it. Or if you're going second, this card is a nice board breaker in some sense. Like if there is a detonator or something like that, you can try to force it out with using tactics talent here. They'll either have to pop detonator or they'll have to do something, right? So yeah, just another good card, and I feel like they're both good going first and second. So it's not like if you're playing these cards, or they're bad if you went second. So um, yeah, so that's the spell lineup. As for the trap lineup, I went back to playing 3 Imperm over Droll because I did realize, even though Droll, like I said, you can use it to sort of summon it and extend if you really, really needed to. Droll was not good into every matchup, into Malice and a couple other matchups where it's probably not going to do too much. So I ended up just siding it and just going back to triple Imperm here. Yeah, and Impermanence is, doesn't really need an introduction there, so all right. And then last off here, we have the 2 Blue Ice traps, and then we have the 2 Buster Blader traps. Not much to say about them. You need at least 1 copy of the Buster Blader stuff. Some people will play more copies of Prologue. That's entirely up to you, because Prologue is, as long as you see Prologue in your opening hand, this is essentially your anti-Nibiru card, and I'll kind of explain that in a second here. All right, let's go over the extra deck and then the side deck, and I'll show you some combos and give you some explanation as to what I mean by like anti-Nibiru and whatnot. Okay, so let me make sure this is kind of organized here. So the Crimson Dragon package, you don't really need, and honestly, a lot of Blue Eyes deck has kind of dropped this because this gets hard punished by Nibiru. Like I said, in my experience though, it's obviously a win more combo. You can play Typhoon instead, or Typhon. You can play Abrogator. You can play other things. You don't necessarily need to play the package. I just have the package, so, and this deck more or less is for fun. So I do want to just pull off some cool combos, and so that I still have these in my deck, but you don't necessarily need them at all. As for the rest of the package here, you still have the one Spirit Ultimate. I cut regular Spirit Dragon down to 2 because, like I said, this deck has a tough time putting out 2 Spirit Dragons most of the time. So getting into the Crimson combo is not really consistent, if at all ever happens. Just because you're going into Protector Whelp most likely, or you get punished by Nibiru. So it's up to you. I think 2 Spirit is probably fine. Um, you know, in the instances like it's like Dominus Purge or something, or not Purge, Impulse, that sucks, but it is what it is. And then finally, I'm playing the one Light Storm Dragon. Decided to just give this a try out. It's just a back row popper. You can also reset cards like your Imperm. You can reset cards like your Solemn Judgment if you're going first and you're signing it in. So it's kind of a nice card that even though when it dies, it still sets a spell or trap card. So it's kind of nice there. And yeah, just back row hate there. You could also play Moonlight Dragon. You can play Azure Eyes if you wanted to. But yeah, I decided to just give this card a shot and see where it goes from there. And then you have obviously the Red Hot Archfiend and Buster Dragon. Hot Archfiend, not much to say, and Buster Dragon, not much to say on that. And then for the rest of the extra deck, I'll just go through it really quickly too, because I don't want to take too much time. Just one of everything here. And then here we have Buster. Sorry, let me move this over here. So you have the one Protector Whelp, the Spears, and the Eyes of Blue here, Spirit. Now, I don't think the YCS list was playing the Whelp or the Buster or Dragon Buster. because I think they are just doing the Buster Lock in the sense that you use it to be basically a one-sided babushka or one-sided skill drain. So he isn't playing the whelp, and I understand why too, because this the Buster whelp doesn't really. It's just additive, right? It's once you have the Buster Lock going, this card is just extra. Like you really doesn't really do anything too much. So if you don't play the Dragon Buster, you don't need the Protector Whelp then at that point, But I'm playing this deck for fun, so we do have that, and so will need the Buster Whelp. Um, yeah, but otherwise, if you don't play the Dragon Buster, then you can probably not need the Whelp. But the Whelp does kind of help unbreak yourself too, and I'll explain that in a second here. Okay, for extra deck here, we have pretty much the same thing here. We have the triple artifact Lancias, a move Droll to the side here. I know some people don't like this card, or they play if you have Frufalos or you have the other more Charmies, you can play those. I don't have any more Charmies, so my extra deck is just kind of based on sort of a budget in some sense. So I'm just playing these instead. Two Ghost Ogres, and then the one Druid Swarm. And then finally we have two Lightning Storm, one Harpies, and three Solemn. So the Lightning Storms can be sort of, well, basically any of this can kind of be changed, right? So you have options of like Droplet that had in my previous deck. I decided to just go back to back row hate versus monster hate, and just play hopefully enough hand traps to stop them from making a board. So that's why we dropped the Droplet again. You can also play Dark Ruler, or you can play Meadow Tonus. I have a couple copies of those, but to play Meadow Tonus, you will need some sort of like decide in like detonators and things like that in order to maximize its effect. And Meadow Tonus it doesn't guarantee a answer because it can be ash blossomed, right? So let me pull out a copy if I have it here. Yeah, so like, it's a good card, but it's got its weaknesses too. So it's not a guaranteed answer to their board. Um, but it's yeah, it's a interesting card, like for sure. I don't, some people main decking this. I don't like that too much, but yeah, it's a good card. You can play it if you like. You have the option of Dark Ruler, Droplet. You have the option of more Triple Tactics Talent. You have that option. You have Ultimate Slayer. It just depends on how you build your extra deck. Because my extra deck doesn't really include any Exceeds. I'm not really playing Ultimate Slayer. And like I said, if you're playing Typhon, like Typhon might be pretty good in the extra deck. Like to out a detonator, you just summon Typhon, and then they can't respond to that, right? And they just bounce the detonator. So yeah, um, if that's what it just depends on how you build your extra deck, and then that's it will depend on how you build your side deck. So yeah, just wanted to talk about that briefly. Okay, as for the combo, right? So let me show you a couple of different, like I guess, combo, or at least way to start the deck. So the most basic example here is having, your one Sage, and then just a random card. So let's say it is, just go put a random card here. So this is just your random card, right? So here's the basic the combo, right? So you go. This is gonna be my hand around here. I'm just gonna put it down here. So you're gonna summon Sages. Gonna search for the Maiden here, and then you pitch Maiden to the graveyard. You'll summon, or sorry, you'll place the True Light onto the board. So let me move my hand over here. This is a bad example. Let me put another random card as it. So this is your hand. This is your field, right? So this is your grave. So you go this, and then you can go True Light to set Wishes. So Wishes is set. You can then link off the Sage, get your Spirit, grab the Mausoleum, play Mausoleum. Use Mausoleum, target the Spirit, send Blue Eyes to the graveyard. So you have that. Then you can activate Spirit if you wanted to, or Wishes. Pitch the extra card, so it doesn't matter really what it is. What you're gonna grab is you can grab Buster Whelp, and you can grab the Roar. So those are the typical two things I usually grab. Then you can if you're afraid of True Light being destroyed by your opponent for whatever reason, you think you could have went into the Spirit first by just summoning Blue Eyes and getting Maiden off, and then you can go in Spirit first before using True Light's effect to set a card. So let's just say we do that, right? So there's the Spirit. We used all that effects up already. You can use the extra normal. Oh, sorry, I grabbed the wrong card here. It shouldn't be Dragon Buster. It should be Whelp. So summon Whelp using the extra normal summon from the field. Search for Prologue. So you have this in your hand right now. So Prologue and Roar. From here, you can do a couple of things. You can either play this, right? Roar to get out another Blue Eyes. You can summon Blue Eyes, or you can summon Jet Dragon. Either way, if you never use your Blue Eyes, if it's still on the board, then you can summon out Jet Dragon. But in this case, we don't have a Blue Eyes, so we'll just summon out Blue Eyes in defense mode here. Now you're locked into dragons. It doesn't really matter too much. So you can either go for here, if you already have your grave set up, you have Buster Dragon in the grave or Destruction Sword in the grave, then you can go into a second Spirit, right? So you can go into a second Spirit if you wanted to, or most of the time you'll be going to Whelp to go ahead and dump either the Destruction Sword Memory or Dragon Buster. Most of the time you want to dump the Destruction Sword Memory so your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to really bestial you. Granted, they probably would have already bestialed you if you gotten to this point, right? But let's say for the sake of argument, we dump the sword, right? So this is our board right now. It's basically, we're going to set this, and then we would have supposedly 3 other cards in our hand. So that's sort of like the basic 1-card combo, right? Or 2-card combo. You need just an extra card in your hand, and you need Sage to kind of get into this. So this board is actually pretty decent, but at any point they could have just nibbed you there. Because we did go through summoning Sage into Spirit, into Blue Eyes, into Maiden, into regular Spirit. So that's 5 summons, and then you went into normal summoning Whelp, and then using the Roar, and then you went into Protector Whelp. So you had a total of 8 summons so far, right? They name you at this point, doesn't really matter. Your board doesn't matter, right? So you can go to Double Spirit, or you can go into if you think your opponent's got nib and they haven't nibbed you at this point, you can go into Seals instead. So if you go into Seals, if they nib you, you tribute your board and Seal will activate. Then you can summon out either Jet Dragon. Where is my Jet Dragon? There is my Jet, or you summon out. Sorry, I'm digging through this. The Bestial, right? So you can summon either one of these, and then you can use a nib token plus your nib token plus the dragon. And if you didn't go into Protector, you can go into Protector Whelp, and you still have the Buster Lock set up. So that's sort of your anti-nib board, right? If you think your opponent's got nib, just go into Seals, or if you don't think they're playing nib at all, then you can just go into Double Spirit, or you can go into Protector Whelp plus the Spirit if you're playing Dragon Buster. That way you can get at least one of those cards in the grave. You get either Dragon Buster or memories into the grave. So that's kind of like your basic combo, right? So that's pretty straightforward there. And there's just obviously different variations of it. But opening up um, the Sages of Eyes of Blue, if you can get into that, you can essentially get into this entire board. Okay, so another thing I wanted to explain, right? So let's kind of let's go back a little bit right here. So let me just reconstruct this board real quick. It doesn't really matter too much. So where did my prologue go? So with this board, right? So your opponent goes. Let's say they do nib you, you lose everything, right? So with this particular version of the deck, right, with Buster Dragon, even if they nib your whole board, this one singular trap will basically produce another board for you. So let's say they go, and what you don't want to do is you don't want to just go standby phase, activate this, um, dump the Buster Blader plus Dragon Buster. Where is the Dragon Buster? Sorry, it might be in my grave here somewhere. Yeah. Since you already have memories in the graveyard, right here, right? So you don't want to just go willy-nilly go prologue into this, right? And then this will fetch you Dragon Buster, and then you activate the trap card in the grave to go into um, Buster Blader, right? So you kind of don't want to do this because it gives them the opportunity to out one of these cards. If they out it, then it kind of sucks in the sense that um, you lose your lock there. So typically, what I would want to do is just wait for them to commit to something. If they normal summon a monster, or they, um, you know, play a spell or whatever, then you supposedly you have three other cards in your hand. It might be like Veiler or Imperm. If that's the case, let them commit to the summon first, and then Veiler or Imperm that particular monster. So it forces them to have a monster on the board. That way you can avoid things like Imperm. You can avoid things like lightning storms. Just basically, or even evenly match, right? So if you're playing any of those cards, by having them have a monster on the board, it kind of protects yourself or shields yourself from losing to just like an imperm. So if you do like standby phase, summon these two, and then they decided to just imperm, I don't know, Buster Dragon, then you're kind of shit out of luck because then now you have Buster Blader, but you can't equip, cards to it, or your opponent's monsters are still activate its effect. But if you let them commit to a summon, then you do this. This is essentially a one-sided babushka, right? So it forces all their monsters to defense mode, and they can't activate their effects. Perfect. That's all you really need to. And doing this, also, you can play around triple Texas Talent or Thrust, because none of these monsters, you don't really need to activate their effects. That, and if they or they try to break it by going Typhoon or Typhon, they can't break this either, because both our effects are continuous. Yes, you can activate Buster Dragon to equip, or yeah, Buster Dragon to equip Dragon Buster to Buster Blader, but that does activate a monster effect. So you want to be careful with that. Like if you activate this, right, you want to be careful if they don't have a Ghost Ogre, or they don't have a triple Texas Thrust. You may want to be careful of that, because if they use that, then you may be in more or less screwed, I guess. But generally, just having these two cards, and all we did was activated two traps. So we activated Prologue, and we activated Destruction Sword Memory in the graveyard to fuse the Buster Blader, and any dragon. You usually just want to get rid of Spirit or something like that. But it doesn't really matter which dragon you fuse with to make the Destruction Swordsman. But essentially, if you just end on this, or you wait for them to commit, then you just produce this, it will kind of mess them up. Like, that's what I've learned playing this deck, is that you don't necessarily have to make a crazy board on your turn. As long as you can get to prologue and maybe just dump one or two cards, you get to prologue, you're really good. Um, the only way for them to really stop prologue is to have something like Dominus Impulse, right? So if they have Dominus Impulse or something like that, then yes, it kind of sucks. But not many decks are playing Dominus Impulse. The only deck that's playing Dominus Impulse is Labyrinth, right? So If you're playing against Labyrinth, in this deck, this particular lock might be kind of pointless anyways because they have plenty of ways out the lock. They have cards like um, Karma Cannon. They don't really need their monster effects. They don't even summon anything from the extra deck. So like, I probably would just even side this out if you're playing against Labyrinth, right? Um, and so yeah, um, like the Sydney deck isn't playing Dragon Buster. It's just going for this. I imagine it's his main focus is to basically have a babushka on your opponent's turn, and the setup is not that difficult to do. As you kind of saw, you only really need 2 cards to really set it up. Granted, obviously you're playing against when you play against real life players or other players, they may have imperms and ash and a bunch of other hand traps. So you will have to try to play around that. But getting to this point, getting to just at least the trap is I found relatively easy. Um, the main weakness and the main choke point of the deck is the first initial normal summon. If it gets like blown up by, it somehow gets blown up. Like if they had Gamma, for example, right? They blow up your first normal summon. Then yeah, that's like the main choke point. But if you can get past that, get into spirits at least, and search for the mausoleum, then you're on your way to basically getting the Buster Lock. And that's why I kind of like this deck is that it doesn't automatically lose to Nibiru. You can outplay Nibiru, um, and your opponent still has to kind of deal with your board if they didn't Nibiru you. And yeah, it's just a very strong going first sort of lock, and even going second sometimes. Like if you are gonna wait a turn, you can still try to set up as much as you can and wait a turn to force your opponent to deal with this. And that might still be okay, but yeah, this deck is definitely stronger going first for sure. Um, but yeah, so let me show you some other like crazy ways to navigate this deck, right? So in one instance where I was test playing my friend, I drew a really weird hand, right? So I drew something like this. I drew this plus, let me just find 2 other random cards here. Uh, let's just use Nibiru as an example. So let's say this was my opening hand, right? So you have 2 Buster and a Destruction Sword, and you have just 2 random cards. It could be double Nibiru, for example. So how do you navigate this? You look at this hand and you go, man, this hand is dead, right? But no, you can still actually play this hand, and I'll kind of show you some um, ways to play it. So what I did was I went Dragon Buster, search for prologue, right? So I got prologue. Um, said, okay, let's go ahead and send it to grab spirit. Spirit will grab the mausoleum, right? Then you can activate mausoleum, send blue eyes to the grave. So this is my grave here. This is our hand, right? So our hand right now is 2 nib and uh, destruction sword and whatnot. So this is what we got so far, right? So our grave or whatever is still kind of weak, but we can then use the second normal summon out the second uh, Buster Whelp. And Buster Whelp, keep in mind, is the search effect is every time it's normal summon. It's not like a hard once per turn or anything like that. The rest of its effects below the bullet point ones, those are hard once per turns, but the normal summon perfectly fine. So I normal summoned Buster Whelp, and what I grabbed was um, the Destruction Swordsman uh, version of the card, right? And from here, what I did was I went, I linked this away to go into Protector Whelp. So with Protector Whelp's effects, I used its effect to dump a card to the graveyard. So I dumped, where is my memories, for example? Dump memories, or you can dump Buster Whelp to the graveyard. It doesn't matter. Let's just dump the memory here, if I can find it. Oh, sorry. Memory's already in my hand. My apologies there. Forgot. So I dumped Buster Whelp to the graveyard, right? So from here, and then you also, with its first effect, the dumping, you can also special summon Buster Blader. So that's what I did. I special summoned Buster Blader using Dragon Whelp's effect, first effect, right? And now this is what we got, right? So we have this in our graveyard. This is our hand. And then what I did after that is I used Buster Whelp's effect in the graveyard. So its effect in the graveyard is that when you have a Buster Bladed monster on the field, you can discard a Destruction Sword or Destruction Sword card and special summon it. So I used it, discarded the Destruction Memory to the graveyard, and now we have this, right? So right now we got basically Whelp, Buster Blader, and a um, um, protector on the board. Or I guess we have two Whelps, right? So here's a couple things you can do. You can either go into sync this away, and you can go into Buster Dragon if you wanted to. But I don't really recommend that. I'd rather just use the trap to do that. So um, what I did is like, okay, this card's useless and this card's useless now, so we can go, and they're double dragons, both of them are dragons. What I went into was I went to Spear mode, right there. So you got Spear mode, and you have a you know Buster Blader right here, and what you can do then is then just set this card, and then that's it. And this board is pretty good. So on your opponent's turn, they summon a monster or whatever, you can go prologue, dump your second Buster Blader, and then at this point, I dumped another Whelp because I think that's the only other Destruction Sword card I had in my deck. So I just dumped these two um, to then summon out the Buster Dragon, and then use memories in the graveyard. Right, so you have memories here. Banish this plus the Buster Blader plus a dragon. So it doesn't really matter which dragon. Let's just use Spirit for example. Banish this to make the Buster Blader, and then from here you can use the Dragon Buster's effect to equip your Buster Blader. Let me scooch this over with the where's my graveyard? My graveyard's over here. So equip it with the Buster Whelp. So that's with me not really using any Blue Eyes cards, right? So I still have this board without essentially using a single Blue Eyes, a single normal Blue Eyes monster or normal. Well, I did use Blue Eyes cards, but I didn't use any opening. I didn't open with any Blue Eyes cards, so I still ended up with this deck or this field without opening up with Sages or Maiden or any other Blue Eyes cards. So it's still a pretty powerful board right here, right? So your opponent's gonna have a tough time dealing with not being able to special summon. They're gonna have a tough time essentially outing this unless they have Book of Eclipse or something like that, or Book of Moon. Have a hard time outing just this, right? They can't access their extra luck in their deck. All their monsters become defensive, and then you also have a seal. You can then use seal to grab your Jet Dragon if you wanted to. If you believe your opponent is trying to destroy your board here with, I don't know, Regeki or right, you can use the seal. If there's nothing to target, you can just bounce this. Doesn't really matter too much. Summon out a Jet Dragon, and then now they try to destroy something. They have to destroy the Jet Dragon. Jet Dragon dies or whatever, right? Your board still stays alive. Or if they try to use Harpy Spider Duster, you can banish the prologue to protect the Buster Dragon, or sorry, Dragon Buster in the graveyard. So yeah, that's basically the lock, right? It's interesting how you can get into this thing or into the lock pretty easily if you just kind of figure out how to be a little. You can engineer a couple of different plays to kind of set this up, and it's pretty easy to get into. Hence why that's why I like playing the two Buster Bladers, because sometimes you just need one of them to your hand, and you just need the other one to go to the graveyard to kind of continue. So having two here actually worked out for me. Versus if I didn't have two, I wouldn't be able to make that board, because sometimes you forget that summoning out Buster Blader itself to the board is not a bad thing. What you can do, is if you had Buster Blader in the hand, and you had Dragon Buster in the hand, and you had Whelp on the board, right? So let me clear some of my board here. If you went Buster, if you open in either any of this, right? You open any of these two cards, you can go summon Buster Whelp, search for the other card. You gotta search for Buster, or if you had Buster Blader, right? You can search for Destruction Sword, use Whelp's effect, tribute it, summon Buster Blader, and then just use Dragon Buster's effect in hand to equip the Buster Blader with this. So this is not the greatest lock in the world, but this will still force your opponent to not be able to access their extra deck until they are able to answer Buster Blader. So essentially, your Buster Blader is sort of a I guess a vanity emptiness, I guess, for lack of a better comparison, I guess. It doesn't block them out of all special summons, but it blocks them from going to the extra deck, so which is really good. And sometimes having this card will also force your opponent not to be able to go into Typhon. So if you have like your, if you have, for example, you had your Crimson Dragon set up, right? They summon out Typhon, and then you're basically locked out of being able to use these effects. But if you had Dragon Buster's sword equipped to a Buster Blader, they can't even out that board with Typhon anymore. Now they have to, specifically use cards like, you know, their removal, like Ultimate Slayers. They have to use Metal Force card. I forget what the card's name. My bad. It's the spell that I just showed you like 2 seconds ago. You have to use that. This card, right? So you have to use this. You have to use where else to try to out the lock. But usually, there's not really any way to out Buster Blader itself. There's not many Earth Warriors that people are actually playing, right? And its typing is just kind of weird, and it's not in an extra deck monster. So all the cards that they generally use to out the extra deck doesn't out Buster Blader itself. Like, it's just a normal monster with no other particularly useful effects, right? And it's there's no way for them to like imperm. There's no way for them to Valor it to continue playing because they have to be able to get rid of this card right here, the Dragon Buster, which is giving sort of that lock effect, right? So yeah, it's just kind of like a couple interesting ways to play the deck, as far as I've learned. And obviously, there's times where you will brick. It's just the nature of playing Blue Eyes White Dragon. It's the nature of playing cards like Buster Blader. There will be moments that you'll be like, man, this hand kind of sucks, But I do find the deck, pretty fun to play, and just finding different ways to get into the lock is kind of fun. And even if you don't have, even if you don't get the lock set up, I mean, Blue Eyes itself is pretty solid. Getting out Spirit Dragon, getting out Seal, getting out Double Spirit Dragon. Just playing Blue Eyes by itself is fine, and then the Buster Engine kind of just helps to give you another way to play around. Cards like Nibiru and just having a one-side Babushka is really cool. So yeah, this deck I think is pretty fun. More fun than comparing to the Invoke deck. Like the Invoke deck is probably just more solid. You're using normal summon Alistair, get out your Macabre, and that's all she wrote sort of thing. Where this deck just requires you to kind of know how to navigate your deck, and if you navigate it really well, it can be rewarding. And so I do think this deck is pretty cool. And yeah, even the one version of the deck got to top 16 at YCS Sydney, so pretty cool. And his version of his deck is like he's playing 3 engines, right? So he's playing Primite, Buster Blader, and Blue Eyes White Dragon. So that's pretty cool. Like I haven't tested that out. I don't have Primite cards, so I don't know. It's obviously probably a better deck than this deck, right? If you wanted to take a YCS, you'd probably want to play his version where the Primite cards are strong on its own. Where like a deck like this, it's more fragile to hand traps. Where his deck plays more low to the ground, and his deck is essentially just trying to get into Prologue. As long as you get into Prologue, you'll have your Babushka lock set up, and that forces your opponent to have to try to out a couple of things. But you have the Primite cards to kind of protect that lock, right? You have drill beam to kind of stop any sort of Book of Eclipse, stop any sort of Dark Ruler or whatever. And that's the cool thing about this particular deck is that it's not weak to Dark Ruler. It's not really weak to, well, I guess it is technically weak to Dark Ruler and whatnot. But you can still have those monsters and bait your opponent to try to get use Dark Ruler or bait them to using Droplet and other stuff before you go into the lock. The lock is kind of like a emergency button that you kind of push to be like, hey, I'm gonna set up this lock. If you can't stop it, you can't stop it. And the only real way they can stop the lock is that if they needs a way to interact with your graveyard, right? They need like a ghost bell maybe, or they need um, some sort of removal. And Buster Blader himself is not a dark or light type. He's an earth type monster, so they can't use Bistral to really interrupt that. So they would need like Impulse. They would need um, you know, Ghost Spell or something that is stopping the trap effects, right? As for the graveyard itself, it's Buster Blader is hard to interact with just because there's not much removal for him other than like DD Crow or um, like I guess Soul Release or something like that, right? But yeah, so anyways, guys, I think I ramble on quite long enough. Hopefully, you guys learned something. And this deck, like I said, it's just a fun deck to play, and I plan on taking it to locals and uh, trying it out there. But yeah, if you have any questions or any comments, or if you find another like maybe cool combo that you can do, just let me know down below, and yeah, we can discuss it. Anywho, that's it. That's all I got for you guys, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.